Hello everyone and welcome to this video. In this video, we're going to be finding Linux and Windows vulnerabilities using Nessus. Alright, so in the previous video, we looked at how to find local and network vulnerabilities using Nessus. Now, that was very basic and we didn't find anything that was very interesting or anything that was relatively interesting. Now in this video, we're going to be using Metasploitable 2. Now, as I've mentioned, Metasploitable 2 is a purposely vulnerable Linux operating system or Linux server that is running plenty of web applications like, PHP-MyAdmin, all of that good stuff. But what we're going to be trying to do is we're going to be trying to find these vulnerabilities that exist within Metasploitable 2, and furthermore we'll be testing a Windows system, which is my host operating system that I'm currently running. As you know, I'm running Kali Linux in a virtual machine. Alright, so let's get started. Now, as I said, make sure you've started up Metasploitable 2, and we want to use the ifconfig command to get the IP address, which in this case is 192.168.1.107. Alright, so once you know that, you're pretty much ready to get started. So we're going to be starting off with Linux. Now, I would assume that you already know how to create a new policy, and that's exactly what we're going to do. So you can run this with Metasploitable 2, or you can use any Linux distribution that you want. It doesn't matter, whatever you want, as long as you know the IP addresses of that computer that's running Linux, and it's on your network, you're pretty much good to go. Alright, so we're just going to go into policies. And we're going to create a new policy. We're going to leave the old one there. And now what do we want to select? This is very important. We now want to select the advanced scan. All right, because we want to customize a few things. And we're going to call it Metasploitable 2 scan. All right, we're just going to scan. We're just going to call it that. Or you can call it whatever you want. It really does matter. So I'm not going to change anything in terms of the settings. When it comes down to plugins, yes, I need to change a lot of stuff here, because we're going to be enabling quite a few important plugins and we're going to disable the ones we don't need, because it just saves a lot of processing time and scanning time. Alright, so let's look at what we need to enable and what we need to disable. So we don't need these two here. We want to enable backdoors because we want to check for backdoors. So I would recommend that you just copy what I do, because this will act as a fantastic guideline for a good scan. Alright, so we're not scanning. We're going to leave CentOS local security checks, because again, you could be running CentOS, and I do not want to, discriminate against your scan. So if you're running CentOS, just leave that open. We're going to get rid of this. Cisco, no, we don't need Cisco. We're going to check for DNS information. That is very important. So DNS, we're going to leave DNS on. Debian, let's see, we're going to enable the Debian local security checks. That's very important, because as we know, you could be running a Debian distribution, which is very common. Or if you are using Metasploitable 2 for this scan, it is Debian based because it's running off Ubuntu. Alright, the default Unix accounts, we're also going to enable that. We don't need these. We're going to look at firewalls, not really. Denial of service, yes, we want to enable that. Firewalls, yeah, we want to leave that open as well. FreeBSD, yes. Gain a shell remotely, yes. FTP, yeah, we also want to enable that as well. We actually need to check for FTP there. General, let's see, Huawei, no, we don't need to look at anything there. So Gen 2, we'll leave Gen 2 on, because you could be running Gen 2 or Gen 2. Sorry if we're going to leave the HPUX local security checks. Huawei, no, we're going to remove incident response. Junos, Mac OS, because I doubt you're scanning a Mac operating system here. We're going to leave the miscellaneous ones. Going to get rid of these ones. Oracle, no, nothing to do with Oracle there. We're going to leave the peer-to-peer file sharing, because that's to do with torrents. Or you know what, we can just disable that. That is really unnecessary here. Let's see what else. Red Hat, no. Oh, you can actually enable Red Hat. That could come in handy. Yes, we're just going to leave Red Hat open. RPC, nah, we don't need that. SCADA, not really. Service detection, you know what, let's leave that on, because we might need that. The SNMP, yeah, we want to leave that on. We're going to disable settings. SNMP, leave that. Solaris, no, we don't need that. Or actually, let's leave that. OpenSUSE, or if you want to call it SUSE, depending. Since we're not scanning Windows, we're going to get rid of all of these other ones. We're going to leave the Ubuntu local one. We don't need to do Ubuntu, or you can actually leave the SUSE and Ubuntu local security checks on. Alright, so those are the plugins that we're going to be using for Linux. More specifically Metasploitable 2, since that's what we are performing the vulnerability scan on. And just hit save, right? So we've created our policy and we're saving it. Excellent. Now we can perform our scan. So I'm just going to go into my scans and we're going to create a new scan, and we're going to go to user defined policies here. and the Metasploitable2 scan. Click on that, and now we name it. So I'm just going to call it Linux. We're just going to call it Linux scan, just to keep things really simple. And I can just give some information there. Metasploitable2, like so. And now we select the targets, which, as I said, you should know. You can just using the ifconfig command on any Linux distribution that you may be running, or in this case, if you're following my way, where I'm using Metasploitable2 as a virtual machine, the IP address for me is 192.168.1.107. So I'm just going to type that in. So 192.168.1.107. All right. And by the way, you can perform the scans on one or more Linux distributions. So you can, if you want to select another target, you can just hit the enter button and just go a line below it and enter your other IP address. But for me, I'm just going to be scanning the Metasploitable2 virtual machine. And once that's done, I do not need to change any of the other settings. I'm just going to hit save. And once it's saved, we can begin the scan. So I'm just going to launch the scan. And obviously this will take significantly longer. I'm not going to say it's going to take that much time, but it should take a few minutes longer than the Kali Linux scan because we've used a lot more plugins. So I'm going to get back to you when the scan is complete. Alright, so the scan has completed, and again it'll be denoted by this little tick, and it'll give you the latest date modified there, so you can actually look at what time the scan was complete. So I'm just going to double click on it as we did previously, and as you can see, there's a little bit more information now, and you might be getting excited, and you should be getting excited. So we've already looked at how to analyze the information, so we're just going to look at what vulnerabilities that we've found. So as you can see, if we move on to the right hand side and we go to the vulnerabilities chart here, we have 10% critical vulnerabilities, 4% high, 15% medium, 4% low. So, you know, we actually have quite a lot of vulnerabilities here. However, we do have a new menu, and that is the remediations. Now, these are the fixes that you can make to solve these or to fix these vulnerabilities. Now, let's just look at the vulnerabilities we were able to find. I'm not going to go in depth into what all of these vulnerabilities are, because there are a lot of them, and you know, when it comes to exploiting these vulnerabilities, there are quite a lot of them, because as I said, Metasploitable2 is designed to be vulnerable. All right, so as you can see, we have some really interesting ones, and the first thing that actually comes to my mind is the VNC server. Now, if you know what VNC is, a VNC allows you to connect from one computer to another and allows you to view your computer remotely. Or to control your computer remotely. So as you can see, the VNC server running on the remote host is secured with a weak password. So it is using the default password, which is in this case, as you can see, it already got the password, which is amazing. The default password is password. So one can easily just log in and you know, can connect to the system and you know, make changes. Now, when it comes down to an attacker, the attacker will then be able to control the system. So Nessus was able to log in using VNC authentication and a password of password. A remote authenticated attacker could exploit this to take control of the system. As I said, you know, these are very big vulnerabilities, and as you can see, it's labeled as critical because this is something that you should be really looking out for. So how would one remediate this? The first thing one would do is they would change the default password to something more secure. Once you do that, this becomes, it no longer is a critical vulnerability. All right, going back to the vulnerabilities page. There are a lot of them, and as I said, I'm not going to cover all of them. I just wanted to show you that you can get quite a lot of them. All right. So as you can see, there are plenty of them. You have your Samba Badlock vulnerability. If you click on that, the version of Samba is essentially a file server, local file server. So as you can see, this version of Samba running on the remote host is affected by a flaw known as Badlock that exists in a security account manager and local security authority. Due to improper authentication, level negotiation over remote procedure call channels, a man-in-the-middle attacker who is able to intercept the traffic between the client and the server hosting the SAM database can exploit this flaw. So it is a man-in-the-middle vulnerability. Again, quite a big vulnerability, but it is labeled as medium. But irregardless of that, you know, these vulnerabilities are really huge. So I would recommend that you just go through them and you look at the remediations that you can perform. Now, if you look at the remediation page here, you can see it's going to give you actions that you can perform right now that will solve some of the, or that'll help you fix some of these vulnerabilities. So one of them is to upgrade Samba version 2.1.11, which is the latest version as of recording this, which is the version installed, and you need to update it to the latest version, which is 4.4.2 or later. All right. So that's great that it tells you to do that. And when it comes to the other vulnerabilities, those are dependent on what you can do to fix it or what you can do to mitigate these attacks. All right. So as you can see, we've found a lot of vulnerabilities here on our Metasploitable 2 virtual machine. And it's fantastic that we know these vulnerabilities, because now we can assess them and then gain our method of attacking the system, which we'll be looking at as we move along now, when we'll be testing for gaps in our system. So this is great. This is excellent. And that's going to be it for this video. I hope you guys have learned a lot in this video. In the next video, we'll be looking at scanning for vulnerabilities on Windows operating systems or Windows computers. So I'll be seeing you in the next video.